Okay, so video 5 is on evil and suffering, and it's a bit of a whopper of a topic. There's quite a lot that you could be asked on this, all right? And some of it is very simple and straightforward, and other parts of it are a bit challenging, all right? So here we go. Now, the first thing we need to know is describe what Catholics believe about the existence of evil and suffering, all right? Now, this is a key topic because the existence of evil and suffering leads quite a lot of people to be a justification of many people why they don't believe in God. All right, so it's a really important topic to know, not just for your GCSE, but for your life past our school. All right, so the first thing to remember, all right, is that you've got there about the fact that where evil comes from. Okay, so if you speak about, right, the first thing being the types of evil. Let's start off on the easier one, all right? So Catholics believe that evil exists because of the misuse of free will by human beings, and that is why moral evil exists. So, for example, rape and murder, okay? Now, it's a cheery way to start a video. Now, the next one, okay, is that Catholics also recognize that natural evil occurs in the world, all right? So, for example, natural disasters like hurricanes and tsunamis, etc., all right? Now, get those two out the way because they're the two that are most straightforward. And also, if you just mentioned about natural disasters, it leads on nicely to the third point, okay? And the third point talks about the fall, and that is where evil originated from, okay? And that is because Adam and Eve turned away from God. And as a result of that, okay, that caused disharmony in the world, right? So that caused the world to no longer be perfect, right? So that is what Catholics would justify as being, right, the reason why natural evil exists. It's the fact that we turned away from God and we caused a disharmony in the world, all right? And that is when evil entered the world. So evil was not created by God, but is a result of human beings, the actions of human beings, the result of the fall. Your final point is that you should link this with Augustinian theodicy, okay? Now, this, right, supports the idea that the lack of harmony that was created by the fall when we turned away from God, right, is the cause of evil, but also that evil comes when there is an absence of God. So it's a very similar idea, okay, that when we turn away from God or when God is absent because of the fact that we've turned away from him, all right, whether that be through our misuse of free will, okay? So those are your 4 points. You focus on the fact that it's misuse of free will, okay, and that causes moral evil. You talk about that evil exists because of natural disasters, all right, which is called natural evil. But then you establish that natural evil is not the fault of God, but that evil originated from human beings turning away from God, all right, when it was called with Adam and Eve, okay, by them defying him, and that's when evil came into the world. You also can link it to Augustinian theodicy, okay, that says exactly this, that evil came into the world, that when human beings turned away from God, or when there is an absence of God or good in the world. One thing I would also say is that, right, that human beings have all been marked with original sin. And you can link this to the idea that we have a compulsion, all right, to commit sin as a result of that, all right? So that's another reason why evil exists, is when human beings give in to that temptation, okay? So if you're struggling with Augustinian theodicy, if you're struggling with that idea, use what I've just said there, but the fact that all human beings have been marked with original sin, so sometimes we give in to that temptation and commit evil. Now, going forward a little bit with that, all right, that if you get asked to explain why the existence of evil and suffering doesn't stop Catholics believing in God, really straightforward, the first one, moral evil caused by misuse of free will, rape and murder, those types of things, right, that it's not God's fault, all right? God has given us free will to test us, to test our actions on earth, and it's when we fail that test, then we turn away from God, that evil exists, okay, that moral evil exists. The other one is, right, about natural evil, but you've got to establish that, remember this is asking why it doesn't stop us believing in God, that you've got to establish that they don't believe that evil was caused by God, but they said that evil originated from the fall, where humanity, represented by Adam and Eve, turned away from God. And at that point, evil and suffering entered the world, okay, because of the disharmony that we created, all right? So Catholics believe that they can still believe in God, as it wasn't his fault. It was the actions of humans that created natural evil. Now, however, right? That naturally, okay, doesn't wash with some, with some people. And as I said, evil and suffering is one of those topics that really leads some people to become an atheist or agnostic, which means not sure, sitting on the fence, okay? Now, so if we look at the first one, all right, my advice to you here is focusing on the 4 omnis again, right? Evil and suffering. Evil and suffering exist, right? It contradicts those 4 things, right? So, first one, God's supposed to be all-powerful, all right? Well, if God is all-powerful, why doesn't he intervene when someone is about to commit, misuse their free will and commit moral evil, okay? It doesn't make sense. The second one is that if God was all-knowing, if he's omniscient, why did he give us free will if he knew that we would misuse it, okay, and cause so much pain and suffering? Now, the next one, okay, the third one is about the fact that God is supposed to be all-loving, all right? Well, if God is all-loving, why does he allow people to suffer, all right, that the time seems needless? So you can link that to the idea of people suffering because of disability, okay? That a physical disability does not link to their actions whatsoever, or you could link it to possibly the idea of miscarriage, okay? That could cause, Catholics believe that life starts at conception, so why has that life been ended when the fetus has not done anything wrong? Now, the other one is that God is supposed to be omnipresent. Well, if God is everywhere, whether that be through us, through the world, okay, why doesn't he intervene more readily when someone is about to create so much suffering? Now, if you can use the terminology inconsistent triad here as well, so we're leaving out omnipresent, we're just focusing on omnibenevolent, omnipotent, and omniscient, okay? Focusing on those. Though the fact we call this the inconsistent triad, all right? That it is difficult for some people to believe that God is always those 3 things, and that leads to, okay, a lack of belief in God, all right? Now, however, right? So, yeah, you could get asked, right, explain why evil and suffering leads to a lack of belief or atheism or agnosticism. If you do that, all right, my advice to you is combine them, okay? Omniscient and omnipotent, put them together, all right, and say that, well, if God is all-knowing and all-powerful, why did he give us free will if he knew we were going to misuse it? And why doesn't he intervene and stop us, all right, when moral evil is about to exist, okay? And then it would say, so the impact that people won't believe in him. The second one, all right, my second paragraph will probably focus on what is contradicted the most, probably, that God is supposed to be all-loving. Well, if he's allowing us to suffer, that's not exactly a loving action, is it? Okay? So, I would be using that as my answer, all right? And I would, again, you could link that with natural evil or moral evil, that if God is all loving, why doesn't he stop our suffering, all right? And obviously that contradiction, it leads to a lack of belief in God. Now, Catholics, though, still believe, all right? People can argue that, okay, to Catholics, and they'll continue to believe in God for the reasons I've already given, but, right, there's a few others about how they respond to evil and suffering, okay? So, Catholics would say that we've got to remember that life on earth is a test, okay? The life on earth is a test. You can link that to the idea of the parable of the sheep and the goats that tells us about the fact that the good will be rewarded and that the wicked will go to hell. Now, if life is a test, okay, he wants us to see how we respond to evil and suffering, but whether we cause it or not as well. So that's your first point, okay? But if you remember life is a test, it'll help you with a couple of the other ones, all right? Because another reason why Catholics still believe in God because of evil and suffering is that they say that it gives us an opportunity to do God's work. All right. So, for example, some can fulfill their social and pastoral role when this happens by whether it be volunteering with the SVP, could be helping the homeless who are suffering. But in response to natural disasters, they could donate to charities such as CAFOD. Okay. The other one, all right, another sort of reason, way that Catholics respond is the fact they say it's down to the misuse of free will that we've already previously discussed in other answers. Another one is the fact that, right, and this is the one sort of in class you've heard me speak about, the idea of your favourite food. So my favourite food, all right, is probably chocolate, okay, and if I ate chocolate all the time, right, then, okay, that would be delicious, right, whatever, but My least favourite food, all right, is iceberg lettuce, or maybe a beef tomato. I'm not a big fan of those either, right? Now, if I'd never eaten, okay, some disgusting lettuce or a big juicy beef tomato, all right, then would I ever really know just how delicious a bar of Galaxy is, okay, or Lindt, let's be honest, okay? That I wouldn't, right? I wouldn't know just how good it was. As a result of that, right, if Earth was perfect, when we went to heaven, right, and that was perfect, would we ever fully appreciate it? My answer would be no. We wouldn't. And the reason for that is that we don't know anything different. Earth and heaven are the same thing, okay, with regards to if we haven't experienced any evil or suffering. Now, the final one, okay, that is a little bit more difficult, I suppose, is that we do not always understand God's plan for us. Now, the example I'd use for this, right, is the fact that there are times in our lives that even suffering helps us to grow. So me personally, okay, that I remember losing a grandparent when I was younger, okay, and I found it difficult to understand why God did that, all right? But a few years later, okay, or about 5 or 6 years later, I lost my other grandmother who I was much closer to, and I felt like that experience that I had before helped to prepare me for when that loss was a bit stronger, okay? So you could link that, and also the idea that there are times in my life, all right, where I've sort of struggled growing up, all right, and went through a few tough times as I was growing up, and as a result of that, I feel like it's helped me to be a better teacher because it's helped to develop my empathy, all right? So I think that the argument I'm trying to make here is the fact that Catholics believe that sometimes we do suffer and we do experience evil, but sometimes we reap the rewards of it later in life, and we don't always understand God's plan. Because remember, God's all-knowing, okay? And the rest of us are not even me.